What if I told you the CLI commands you've memorized could soon be obsolete? APIs are changing networking forever, and 92% of Fortune 500 companies are already using them. In this video, I'll show you how REST APIs work. It's simpler than you think, and why learning this skill could double your salary as a network engineer. The future is here. Are you ready? As network engineers, we typically use the command line interface, the CLI, or a graphical interface to configure or monitor our network devices. Order output analysis. Show and debug by scripts is quite difficult, as these commands are more for humans. For this reason, in order to interact with applications or network devices, we can use an application programming interface, which is called an API. So even if the acronym is scary, an API is simply a software interface which allows other applications to communicate with its own application. By the way, API stands for Application Programming Interface, and the most important word to remember is interface. This is the simplest word because we all use interfaces on a daily basis. For example, the remote control of a television is an interface because it's a way to interact with the TV without having to dip your fingers into the wires and circuit of your TV. On the remote control, there is a set of buttons that allow you to perform different operations, such as changing the volume, changing the channel, or even turning off the TV with the red button. Each button corresponds to a specific action. For example, we know that we can't turn on the TV with the volume button. For this to work, you have to respect the interface and interact with it in the way that was intended when it was designed. Without realizing it, we use a lot of interfaces on a daily basis. Another example is a restaurant menu. The menu is a way of interacting with the kitchen. Different choices are offered to us in the menu, and we have to select an option. The waiter will communicate your choice in the kitchen, and you will receive your dish according to your request. Well, websites and apps need the same thing to communicate and exchange data. By the way, this is where the AP of API comes from. An API is an interface for applications, because software has no hands or eyes to interact with physical interfaces. There are several types of APIs, with a different set of conventions for different needs. The NSE focuses on the model Representational State Transfer, REST, API. It is the most popular API for network automation applications. The REST API was created in 2000 by Roy Fielding, who is an American computer scientist who has made a significant contribution to computer science, having participated in the development of several important technologies such as HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and URI, Uniform Resource Identifier. It's really a web specialist who even co-founded Apache. The REST API has a high level of certification, which is why it can also be found with acronyms for RESTful API. So, let's take a closer look at REST-based APIs. REST-based APIs, RESTful. In the meaning of a REST API, representational state transfer, the word representation means that we transfer the representation of a resource between a server and a client. This is usually done in the data format JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, or XML, Extensible Markup Language. And the state transfer means that every operation with a REST API is self-contained. REST APIs typically use HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, to retrieve or send information between applications. These are the same HTTP methods which we use with a web browser to visit a website, except that here, it's used to interact with an application. We will detail the four most popular methods of HTTP: the GET, is a read-only method of retrieving a specified resource. The POST allows you to submit the data to the resource for processing. It is also capable of creating new resources. PUT is the method capable of updating the resource, replacing existing data. And the delete allows you to delete a resource. So you might be wondering, what is a resource? Well, a Webby resource is content that can be found online and that can be watched, read, listened to, or even interacted with, as is the case with videos or online questionnaires. With a REST API, it could be a row in a database. HTTP is very popular, so REST APIs can be used in almost any programming language. Access to a resource is at using a Uniform Resource Locator, URL. These are the same ones we use for the web. In the example, the URL is used to access the resource from loopback 0 on router 1. In fact, REST APIs simply mimic the way the web works in exchanges between a client and a server. The REST API has 6 attributes, which are client-server architecture, stateless operation, with caching, cacheable, and with cache memory, with a uniform interface, with a layer system, and a code on request, optional. The first 3 of these attributes are at the heart of how a REST API works. We will therefore detail these first 3 attributes. Client-server architecture. In a client-server architecture, the client and the server are independent. That is, they interact with each other through the requests that the customer makes. The client sends a request, and the listening server returns a response. Stateless. In a stateless configuration, the server does not store any status regarding requests that it has already received. For example, it doesn't know if a customer has already requested a resource just before, nor does it allow you to know what resources have been requested by a customer. Being stateless means that the server has no idea about the state of the client between 2 requests. This allows you to gain in performance. Cacheable. And with the cache attribute, the server includes a version number in its messages. The customer can use it to decide whether to request a resource again or use the cached data. It's the same principle as the internet. The client must be able to keep information in memory without constantly needing to ask the server for everything. Good management of caching times improves the performance of client-server exchanges. The first 3 attributes we just saw are the only basic concepts to see for the CCNA.